So today I changed my title a little bit. The fundamentals of mental health are obviously going to be in this, but you're chamber members. And so I thought, well, let's broaden this beyond your individual things that you can do and watch for, and also what you can do as an owner or an employee of an organization in order to help support others' mental health, through your culture, things to look for, signs and symptoms of a problem, as well as what to do. How do you support someone? All right. So I just covered the agenda there. So we got that. And if you want, if you have questions along the way or just, want to have me slow down and re-explain something, please do. All right. I tend to move around and jump around. A lot of people like to have facts in terms of mental health. And we know that COVID has had a tremendous impact on our mental health. And a wonderful resource, Mental Health America, which is in your resources on the back, provides different screening tools that you as an individual can access, as well as employees, just to do a screening to find out where you are. And we know that loneliness and isolation are one of the biggest factors that are causing the mental health crisis that we're experiencing now. While 1 in 5 workers will experience a mental health condition in a year, so look around the room, right? 1 in 5, we know that 4 in 5 workers report that workplace stress affects their relationships with friends, with family, and coworkers. How many of you experience workplace stress? Everybody should have their hand up, right? There's probably seasons that are a little bit more stressful than others, but it's workplace stress, it's family stress, it's house repair stress. Stress is a part of life. And when we're in a workplace where the culture maybe isn't very positive, or we're very busy and we don't have good work-life balance, that has a negative impact on our mental health, and it has a ripple effect into other areas of our life. We know that 4 in 5 workers feel emotionally drained from their work. That's significant, all right? If you've ever been to a stress management workshop, you'll learn, and you're going to learn today, that there are signs and symptoms of stress overload. I refer to these as our body's check engine light, right? What happens if you were to ignore that check engine light on your car? What are the potential consequences of that? Breakdown, right? And is it ever convenient to have your car engine light come on? No. But if we ignore the engine light, we're likely to break down somewhere, and the cost for the repairs is going to be pretty heavy, potentially, because we ignored the problem, and it's going to take longer to recover. So we want to keep that in mind as we look at positive mental health strategies, because it's important that we do not ignore the signs and symptoms of stress overload. We need to tune in to how we're doing, and there are simple things that we can do to get ourselves back on track, which I'll be talking about here in a bit. About half of Americans will meet criteria for a diagnosable mental health condition sometime in their life, right? Did you know that as much as, and possibly more than 80% of the reasons why people go to a medical doctor can be related in some way to poorly managed stress, right? And so oftentimes we put a lot of emphasis on our physical health, right? So let's say tomorrow morning you wake up, throat's a little sore, a little achy, maybe you're running a little fever. You're gonna go probably take some Advil or something like that, right? But if the symptoms persisted, if they got worse, how many of you might make an appointment to go see a doctor and have it checked out, right? Telehealth, you might go in. Well, the same is true with our mental health. There are signs and symptoms of being okay and signs and symptoms of growing distress, all right? So just like how we manage the stress in our daily lives, we need to be aware of those signs and symptoms. And when we notice changes that are kind of staying in place for a while, we need to take action. Because just like physical health issues are highly treatable, so are mental health issues. And we really don't want people suffering in silence. And there's one reason right here. The average delay between symptom onset and treatment is 11 years. Why do you suppose that is? Denial. That's part of it. I'm fine, right? Or during COVID, everyone's stressed, right? Why am I any different? We'll get through it. What else would keep people from getting help?
The stigma.
Stigma. That's right. Yeah, stigma. And
I don't want people to know I'm crazy.
I don't want people to know I'm crazy, even though several people have said that to you when you came in here, which is concerning. And we might need to talk about that.
That just means we already know.
That means we already know. That's right.
That's a symptom.
It could be a symptom. We'll get there. All right. So there's the denial that it's a problem. Everyone's suffering right now. Life is hard, right? There's the stigma, or that mark of shame, in having a mental health issue, because years ago, mental health people, someone who was struggling was considered what? Crazy. Not true. Yes.
Don't get over there anymore. You're going to fall down.
Am I going to trip on this?
You're going to trip on that. You're stressing me out.
Okay, I'm stressing him out. I need to stay right here. I appreciate that. Although, remember, 1 in 5 are going to experience a mental health condition at some point in life. That's pretty high, folks, right? And how does that tie to you and also your work environment? We know that depression and anxiety, those are the most common forms of mental illness in children and adults, cost the U.S. economy $200 billion in lost productivity a year, right? And you're going to see why as we look at the signs and symptoms and the impacts. And we need to look and make sure, as part of our solution, that we're able to get people access to care. We need to talk about mental health and make it normal, just like physical health. And that will help shut that gap of 11 years in seeking help. That's a long time to suffer, folks. All right? So what is mental health? All right? Our mental health encompasses our emotional, psychological, and social well-being. So bottom line, your mental health influences how you think, it influences your emotions, and it ultimately influences how you act. We know that when we're having a rough time with our mental health, it's more difficult to handle stress. Little things that normally wouldn't ruffle our feathers, if you will, become a really big deal, right? COVID. Ongoing uncertainty. We're like pivoting every other day to meet the needs of customers, to do our job effectively. We're worried about family members we don't see really end in sight, all right? And when that stress is building and building and building in that way, it's really hard to think straight. It's hard to solve problems, to be creative, to make good decisions, all right? Mental health affects everything. We know that it's important at all ages and stages of life. From the time a child is born, through the ending years of a person's life, mental health is important. And if you look at the statistics, even sadly, with suicide, we've seen a trend upward with more retired folks, older folks dying by suicide, experiencing depression, all right? We also know that a person's physical health influences their mental health. So people who are dealing, I have a mom that has severe osteoarthritis, and she's in a lot of pain. And it's really hard to find the right combination of medication to help her even sleep at night. And that wears down on her mental health. By the middle of the day, she's saying, wow, I would never do anything to harm myself, but this really sucks. My quality of life is kind of in the toilet right now, or at least it is by 1 p.m. every day. And so we can't separate, and this is important as we look at solutions, because many of the solutions for maintaining positive mental health also apply to our physical health. All right? We cannot separate the two. They are connected. Our relationships, and there's one more on here, and that's genetic influence. I was at a conference not too long ago where they were talking about research in mental health and how it runs in families, all right? And one of the things that they'd show through their research is that if you are a child born of a parent who had a mental illness, like anxiety, there's your most common one, you are 35% more likely than someone whose parents did not have any mental illness to experience a mental illness in your life. Now, that does not mean you will, all right? It's risk factors like cardiovascular disease, sedentary, and so it's similar, like when you go to the doctor and you take checklists of heart disease in the family, seizures, thyroid, all those different things. Here's where this is helpful. So if I have a client that comes into Burns and Mac or Abundant Life, and it's a young kid, I'm seeing more and more teenagers, and the kid's struggling, I'll talk to the parents about, have you had any experience? Oh yeah, got anxiety, got this and that. It helps us with DNA as people get older, because sometimes the best practice in treating a mental illness is a combination of a medication to get their brain chemicals working correctly, because there's an imbalance there, and talk therapy and support. And if we have a family member who's taken something that's helped them, that really makes it easier to know where to start in order to get their body, their brain chemicals back on track so they can feel good and able to make habit or lifestyle changes or just get up and live their life. All right? And so it's important information that we have that. Now, what is mental health? We've already done. So okay. So we talked about stigma. All right? I'm just going to touch on this very briefly. Mental health stigma has kept many people from speaking up and getting help. When a person is struggling with a mental illness, there's often shame and embarrassment involved in that. If somebody is feeling paranoid, for example, about germs and being, infected by something, so they're washing their hands a lot, they might know, and we call that obsessive compulsive disorder. I have a 23-year-old who has OCD, and she knew in her head, this isn't making any sense. I'm not contaminated, but yet I'm very fearful of germs, and my way of dealing with that is to wash my hands. This is just insane. What's the matter with me? People are going to want to try to hide that type of behavior because they'll think, well, other people think I'm crazy. But bottom line, once we realized what was going on and we could plug her into the right type of exposure response therapy, she got a handle on it. And she's in graduate school, and she's got meaningful friendships, and things are going well, all right? So oftentimes, just like physical health issues, mental health issues are unseen. You have no idea what's going on in another person's life. We tend to live the Facebook mentality where we put up the highlight reel of the best stuff in the world, right? We don't say, well, today really sucked. My teenager didn't come in on time. I got in a fight with my husband, and well, right? We're not going to highlight that stuff. But we know that people tend to put their best foot forward when the reality is when you look underneath the surface and really get to know each other, we're all struggling in some way, especially that guy right there, right? So, bottom line, and it's really important to remember this, is that if a person is struggling with their mental health, it is in no way a reflection of their character or their intelligence or their work ethic, all right? And that's really critical to understand that, because if you tell someone who's struggling, come on, everyone's struggling, get over it, that's not helpful. Not helpful at all. It just adds fuel to the shame that that person may already be experiencing. Now, all right, whoa, I'm really suffering with this. Okay, so here's the thing. I keep wanting to walk over here and you tell me I can't. Okay, so think of your mental health on a continuum, right? You are gonna have some good days where things are going well, right? And there's gonna be days that are just kind of crummy, and that's normal. There might even be a period of time where things are feeling kind of crummy, but you're still able to get through and get by, and it's not impacting your ability to work or relate to other people or get the job done at home, right? It's not having a huge impact on life. But when we look at these fluctuations and we know that they're normal, and there's more copies of the handouts for anyone who want to bring this home. It's gonna look a little different, but it's the same information. So we go from healthy to reacting. So healthy, normal mood fluctuations, we're starting to react, and so we're maybe a little bit more impatient or irritable than we normally are. If that progresses from an emotional perspective, we might experience anxiety. We might start feeling sad, hopeless, overburdened, like nothing's going to change. And it also can lead to angry outbursts, aggression, panic attacks, all right? And so there's a progression in the symptoms that we see in mental health that let us know that, hey, I need to pay attention here. I'm starting to react. My yellow check engine light is on. Some of the things you might notice in yourself and other, as we're starting to react, we might become more sarcastic, although some people speak sarcasm, right? We might notice ourselves procrastinating a little bit more than usual, right? We might become forgetful, right? You know, forgetting the keys in the car or forgetting something important as you're heading out the door in the morning. We notice impacts on sleep. In fact, one of the most critical pieces, there's a lot of important pieces in healing mental health, but one of the big ones is getting enough sleep. And who can tell me what is the minimal number of hours of sleep you as adults should be getting every night, minimum?
8. 4.5. 6. I'm kidding.
You two need to sit together. Okay, 7 is the minimum. Some people need as many as 9 or more. It is. Yeah, oh, would that be nice, right? And so one of the first things that I look at, that other providers look at in treatment is, we gotta get this person sleeping, right? And oftentimes it's not being able to shut down that brain. Ever have a night like that when you got stress going on? Falling asleep but getting up and not being able to shut down that brain. And oftentimes when we tune into that brain and our mental chatter, which we all have, a lot of times it's really negative. We're focused on hypotheticals, but what if? Or we're thinking about situations from the past and going, well, if only I had, right? And so we have to learn to manage that mental chatter in a healthy way. So trouble sleeping, intrusive thoughts, catastrophic thinking, here's our mind-body connection. Physical aches and pains. When you're feeling stressed out, how many of you notice it right here Yep. How many of you get headaches or even migraine headaches? Those are terrible, right? But that's a response to stress. That's your mental health reacting. People will often come to where I work at Burns and McDonnell. It's within a health clinic. And they have doctors, nurse practitioners, a health coach, a fitness coach, and mental health people. And oftentimes people will come to the clinic because they're just horrible stomach aches, or they feel like they're panicking, right? And what's cool about working within an interdisciplinary team is they'll grab so and say, hey, I want you to meet our mental health person here. No, you're not crazy, but I think if you learned how to better manage your stress and your expectations of yourself and perhaps others, that might help with this whole stomach thing you have going on, right? There's a strong mind-body connect. What are you two giggling about?
Because I'm crazy and he's laughing.
Okay, so we got 3 for over here now. No, she likes it. I love it. Okay, so there's that mind-body connection, body aches and pains, decreased activity. That's another thing you need to watch for, is when people start experiencing mental reactions, distress, most people start withdrawing from social situations and isolating. And that creates more of a problem. All right? So we always want to gently keep that door open to social activity. We want to notice the changes that are happening. I'm going to talk about self-medicating behaviors in a minute, but we're going to hold on that. And we're going to look a little bit at some warning signs of mental illness. Now, this is not intended to diagnose any of you. All right? These are just things to watch for. If a person is experiencing, and you are not allowed to point to different people right now, a few of these different symptoms up here, this could potentially be your check engine light, right? Just like we'd go to a medical doctor for physical stuff, this is where we get some consult on mental health stuff. Feeling very sad or withdrawn for more than 2 weeks is part of the diagnosis for major depressive disorder. It affects all areas of the person's life. People who have struggled with depression will say that it's like trying to get up in the morning is like walking through quicksand. Simple things like taking a shower require a tremendous amount of energy. It's a medical condition, it's serious, and it requires treatment, and it's treatable. Trying to harm or end one's life, all right? Anytime a person talks about, my life isn't worth living, I'm hopeless, I feel like I'm a burden to others. If people are talking in that way, we need to stop and say, tell me more. How long have you been feeling this way? Do you have a plan? All right? A lot of people, and some of you sitting here are going, what? I'm not going to plant an idea in someone's head. The reality is you aren't going to plant an idea in someone's head that they weren't already thinking. But by reaching out and having that conversation, you know that you can get them to help to a safe place. Because one of the things, I could do a whole thing on suicide prevention. I ran the Youth Mental Health Task Force out here for like 3 or 4 years after we had some major incidents, several incidents, regardless. What we've learned is that when a person dies by suicide, there's like this hour window. They've narrowed it down to like an hour where the person is truly not in their right mind and they're ruminating. And during that time is when the safety issues become a major problem. I don't know, there's a gentleman, Kevin Hines, who jumped off the Golden Gate Bridge and survived. And he has an awesome documentary out there if you would like to learn more about that. And this was the same is true as Robin Williams, right? You think this guy is everything, he's hilarious. What? Severe depression? You just don't know. But what the Kevin Hines had said was that he didn't want to die. He did not want to die. And when his heels left the bridge, he really regretted jumping, but he wanted his emotional pain and suffering to end. And he didn't think it would end. He was only 17 years old, right? What's cool is a sea mammal kept him up afloat until the Coast Guard could arrive. I mean, the story behind that's huge. This guy is a motivational speaker now who still is diagnosed with bipolar disorder, but lives a very meaningful life where he's contributing to society, he's married, he has kids. It's all highly treatable. Let's see. Okay, so we got risk-taking behaviors. I'm not going to go through every one of these. Some related to anxiety is feeling on edge or overly worried about things when really seemingly life is okay. So it's kind of like feeling like a fire alarm has been pulled, but there's really no fire. And so that can be very confusing for the person who's experiencing that. Changes in behavior, difficulty concentrating, troubles, staying still, fears about things that really don't make a whole lot of sense because the person is safe. So unrealistic or things like that. So what do we do about it? All right. I'm going at this from a manager's perspective. In your handouts, this looks different than up here because I was worried that you wouldn't be able to see it if I printed it in color. So I changed it. So number one, and we're going to be diving into this deeper, lead by example. You're going to get a lot of tools for how to take care of your own mental health. You need to know your people. What motivates them? I know there's a fine line between business and personal stuff, but having a sense of what's going on in your employee's life, what is typical behavior, what is a little bit different going on. Having a good business climate, identifying problems, dealing with performance issues, being genuinely concerned, and being a mental health advocate. Doing things to promote positive mental health within your organization, and I'll be giving you ideas there. Now, when a person is moving into reacting, injured, or ill, we're really focusing in on what are the behavior changes that we're seeing. We're going to address that in private, obviously, with that individual. Hey, John, or hey, June, I've been noticing that you've been coming to work late and that some of the reports or things that you normally do have been a little late, coming in. And you seem just kind of a little off. I care about you. Are you okay? We want to have that conversation and let the person know, I'm noticing this. I care about you. Let me know, what's going on so that I could, connect you with some resources. And so it's really important that we know where those resources are and how people can easily access those resources. Many companies have employee assistance programs where an employee can go and have a certain number of sessions for free with a licensed mental health professional. And what's neat about that is they could just call the EAP directly. They don't have to go through human resources or other things. But there's also a lot of resources in town. But just being ready, communicating with human resources about what's going on. What additional supports do we have for this person? If it's someone who's struggling, per se, with depression, maybe we could switch their hours up a little bit where they are still effective at their job, but they're working during times where they're more awake, ready to go, they have more energy, making adjustments in order to help that person be successful. And one of the other things that I said over and over during COVID, when I was doing presentations, is when someone's struggling with mental distress, injured illness, we want to break down the behaviors to the real basic concrete things that we need that person to do. all right? People, when they're experiencing mental distress, it's hard to be super creative, all right? We're going to notice some changes in productivity. So we might need to have some safety nets there as this person is, getting help, all right? So those are, any questions on what a manager can do? I'm kind of flying through this just a little bit, but I don't mean to not stop. Okay. Now we're getting, okay, so there's managers. Okay, so anxiety disorders are the most common form of mental illness affecting children and adults, okay? So these, again, this is not meant to be a diagnosis, but these are some of the things that we typically look through for screenings and as we're communicating with a client. Just feelings of apprehension and dread, even though there's really nothing to be so much dreading. Or maybe they do have something going on, but their anxiety is so high, they're feeling sick about it. I coach a local swim team, and we'll have kids that perform that get so ramped up before their competition that they're throwing up, right? Perhaps you were there. You were involved in that. Public speaking's one that can really throw you off. But think of that just happening on a daily basis for really no apparent reason. I have a client that I'm working with right now who knows that it's going to be a good day when she doesn't throw up in the morning when she gets up to go to work. I know, and people are living like that. She's not so much anymore because I'm helping her. But, those types of things. Anticipating the worst case scenario, physical symptoms, the pounding heart. People who've had a panic attack, if you've ever had one, I haven't, my husband did. He thought he was having a heart attack. And it happened in an airport. And so they brought in the ambulance and he got to spend a day at the hospital being tested for different things. And so some of that is hard to discern between other things a person might be experiencing, yet panic attacks are another very common form of an anxiety disorder. So you can see how it kind of triggers your whole body reaction. And that's because when we feel threatened, I'll just use that word, our brain triggers our fight, flight, freeze response. And so we've got these cortisol, adrenaline, hormones going through our body to prepare us for protecting ourselves, right? But with someone who has an anxiety disorder, that stress response is triggered even in times when there is no threat, all right? And so if you know someone with an anxiety disorder, oftentimes they require more sleep than your average person, especially as they're recovering because their body's in that state of heightened stress for longer periods of time. Now, the other one that is very common is depression. And I don't know why.
Takes about a second.
Okay, I'm just being really, okay, calm down. Shh, got it. So depression, mentally feeling sad, overwhelmed, physically having aches and pains, mentally not being able to think very clearly, or again, brain going to the worst case scenario. The big thing here, just like anxiety, where a person is on edge, depression is, like I said, walking through quicksand. So everything the person does is taking a tremendous amount of energy. Things that you would just do for granted, no big deal, are taking a tremendous amount of energy. And if we look at MRI scans of brains, this is just fascinating and coming out, they'll do contrast MRI scans of the brain with people who have a mental illness and people who don't, and then after treatment, and you can see the differences in the brain and how things are lighting up and firing. And after training, retraining therapy treatment, you can see the brain looking more like your typical brain, right? No one would ask to have, this may seem random, but I'm going there. No one would ask to have cancer or diabetes or anything else. Just like no one wants to have an anxiety disorder or be dealing with depression. And we're getting more and more information as we study mental health of how common it is and how it affects our whole body systems. All right, I'm just going to press it and wait. Oh, I did it. Okay, this is really, really, really important here. Okay, all of this is, but this is really important. Okay, so how to support someone who is struggling with their mental health. There are definitely do's and don'ts. Don't say, we all go through tough times, you'll be fine, stop worrying. That's like telling your teenager, I know you just broke up with your first boyfriend, but goodness gracious, it's no big deal. You'll find the right guy down the road, right? We don't want to minimize what a person is experiencing because that makes them less likely to talk more about what they're going on. So we want to say, I care about you and want to help, right? I'm here for you. And for some people, it's just being in the room. For some person, and this can be hard for some of us, and you know who you are, it's just giving a person a space to talk, to vent, to, express what's going on in their lives without having you fix it, right? Without you putting suggestions in there and that, unless they're asked for, all right? So we're listening. We don't ignore talk of suicide. We actually have a new, the National Suicide Prevention Hotline is 988, and so that makes that simple. A person doesn't have to be suicidal to call that number. You could call for someone and say, hey, here's my situation, what should I do? And oftentimes if someone's in your office or in your space, you could call the number and say, hey, I need you to talk to so-and-so. Because that can be one of the biggest struggles for someone who is suffering is asking for help. And so now you're facilitating that. Help the person schedule that appointment. Navigating healthcare is a bear. And when a person's depressed, for example, that's just a whole lot for that person to take on. And so helping them drill down, here's where you can go. Here are the providers. Here's the number. I can give you a ride, right? But helping make those connections. We don't want to say, what do you want me to do? I can't solve your situation, right? You're not alone in this. Oh no, wait. We do want this. I didn't switch these. That's terrible. You are not alone in this. I'm here for you. That's good. That's good. All right. I'm so, okay. Talk to me. I'm listening. Those are our messages. Those are actually two good ones over there. But here's one thing that people get confused with as they try to fix the person, right? Unless you are a licensed mental health professional who has the training and experience to do that, that is not your job. You are just there for support, to listen, to be there for the person. If it's a family member or a really close friend or something, perhaps you go to an appointment and say, hey, how can I help? What is my role here? It is not your job to fix that person, all right? Yes?
Is it safe to say that the 3 under the do need to go under the don't, and the 3 under the last 3 on each column?
Oh my goodness, this is so messed up.
Right? Or am I crazy? I was like, man, you don't want to say, talk to me, I'm listening? I thought that would be a do, not a don't.
It's okay to make mistakes. That's a big one, though. So if we can kind of perfectly human, see, love that. So we might need to draw some arrows there. Really, hire me to come to your business. I will send the right messages. My gosh. It was. Yes.
Why depending upon what's up on the board is so tough.
I
You never know
what I did wrong. He's going to help me talk like I know what I'm talking about after this session. Okay, here are things that you can do to support positive mental health. These are proven. Here's your to-do list.
Answers.
The answers are coming now. Oh, we're out of time. No, I'm kidding. We're going to do it all. right, sleep, 7 to 9 plus hours of sleep. What interferes with 7 to 9 plus hours of sleep? Life. So what do you need to change in order to make sleep a priority to get at least 7? What do you need to say no to? Right? Life, work. You know, part of it, you know, if your parents, you know, let's say you have kids and you're running them all over the place, you got to set limits on what you're saying yes to. It's okay to say no, right? There's only 24 hours in a day. And you are the only person who can make, you know, your mental health, your health and wellness a priority, and sleep affects your physical health as well. All right? If you're, what's that? It is a habit change. Yeah. Yes.
So I'll volunteer some information. So my daughter is in college.
Yes.
And she struggles with anxiety sometimes, it's ups and downs, whatever. But one thing that isn't on this list that I know affects her, kids, there's the big coffee craze. They all have to have coffee, whatever. If we're doing anything to wind down, it's to go have a coffee.
Not that, yeah.
And she doesn't drink enough water to offset that. So that
Right.
also increases some of that feeling of anxiety.
Right.
Being on technology or social media obviously increases it some.
Yeah.
And then not enough sleep because we're going to go party on the weekends or we're going to do whatever is fun, hanging out with people that way. And then you don't replenish those fluids. So fluids is a big part of it for her and that kind of stuff, which is something we have to constantly remind her of. Like, hey,
You're drinking enough water.
make sure you're drinking or you take
Yeah.
a water bottle with you.
Oh, absolutely. You know, and when kids, you know, like, you know, again, going back to coaching, I'm doing swimming because I coach swimming. When kids start saying, Coach, my head hurts, or I have muscle pains, or I'm just feeling, you know, a lot of fatigue, it's like, did you drink any water today? Where's your water? You know, and that's part of it. And so having good hydration, even if you're not an athlete, I mean, that is really important. And having a routine, I could do a whole thing on sleep, you know, but getting the screen out of the room, social media, scrolling, oftentimes it's what you're seeing on the screen that makes it difficult to sleep. Yes?
The blue light on your phone
Yes?
will actually trigger chemical in your brain that will keep you awake for 2 to 3 hours after looking at it. So
Yes.
if you're looking at your phone after dark and you're having problems sleeping,
Yeah.
you might reconsider looking at your phone.
Yeah. It prevents the release of the hormone that helps your brain to calm down. And that's huge, especially like if you have a teenager, when they start going through puberty, it takes them longer to shut their brain down, period. But then you go and you add a screen to that, and you got more issues. TV.
Late night.
Yeah, watching The Criminal Minds or Dahmer or something like that right before bed, not a good idea. How we nourish our body, right? Hydration, more fruits and vegetables, less processed foods that are high in sugar. Sugar causes inflammation. Exercise. Are you getting your 10K steps? I think that's the new guideline there, right? And here's an interesting fun fact. I was working on a project with Parks and Rec. It was unplug and explore your community. We were trying to get people off technology. And through research on that, I learned that if you exercise outside, you are more likely to exercise more intensely and for a longer period of time. And so getting outdoors and moving, just doing whatever it is to help you move, is going to help your mental health and your physical health. Relationships. People need people, right? And so making that a priority. And you probably have different people in your life that kind of fulfill different needs, right? The friend that will tell you what you need to hear when you don't really want to hear it. The person where you just don't want to talk about what's hard in life, we just want to go and have some fun, right? A person who's a very good listener. But making our friendships a priority, you know, when they research on happiness, communities or people who live in a community where there's a lot of interaction and support tend to have a greater outlook, a better outlook on life. And that is because people need people. So mindset, have you guys had Robin Todd do some mindfulness training with you yet? She's awesome. That's some good stuff there. Giving back to the community, gratitude, coping skills. We're going to do it real quick around the room on that one. What do you do to help yourself rest, relax, and rejuvenate? This is your self-care. What do you engage in to help with that?
Guitar.
Really? Yeah. That's awesome. Guitar. What else? Instrument. What's?
Massages.
Oh, yes. Yeah, get a massage.
I get my toes done.
Ooh, pedicure. That guy here gets pedicures. What else? No judgment.
Workout.
Working out. Yeah, going to the gym. Any of you play pickleball? That's like a big thing now. I'm going to try it. So pickleball, hobbies, taking a hot bath, taking a break, using your vacation time. You know, it's whatever helps you to rest, relax, re-energize your batteries. Those are self-care skills. And those are things that will help you to have positive mental health, things that is important to make a priority. As far as work environment, these are some of the things that I talked about earlier when we were talking about how to support a person's mental health. All right, and so that will be in your handouts. Why am I doing this? So really just talking about mental health. Years ago, we did a campaign here for all of the students, which is something that you could do even in a work environment. And the campaign was called How Full Is Your Cup? But I think they called it Stress Less. But anyway, they did something where they were talking and introducing folks to healthy stress management options. Here's are some of the things that you can do to lower your stress. And first, the students identified what is the stressor, because that's the first step. What's causing me to stay up, right? And they put it on this cup. How full is your cup? We found a teacher's name on there repeatedly, so we had to change that up the next round. Then we provided them with tools throughout the week of healthy ways to reduce their stress, right? What do you do then if you need help, if it's not working, right? And so we got them connected with tools for getting mental health support if they should need that. Now, I was told 5:15, so I want to be respectful of your time. Does that seem accurate? 6. We could just keep talking. No, I have a client at 6, so no. Okay, here's something that we need to watch for. There's more negative impacts, but one to keep in mind that became very big during COVID was alcohol, right? Huge, became a big factor, and so we've got more calls going in to get treatment and help for overcoming addictions. There's nothing wrong with having a glass of wine or whatnot. The problem is if you're using a substance to deal with an uncomfortable thought process or emotions, that's a problem. Because it's like putting a patch on a leaky roof. Eventually, you're going to have more damage and the patch is going to fall through, all right? And so being aware of how much alcohol or whatnot, that we're consuming and just being honest about why am I doing this right now? Is this an escape? Am I trying to numb something away? Do I just not want to deal with something in my life right now that's in front of me that I need to deal with? Unresolved trauma or abuse, all right? Trauma-informed care is something we're going to see changes happening. They are already happening within doctors' offices because of a study that was done by Kaiser Permanente Healthcare. I don't know if I'm saying that right, but what happened is they did inventories of people who had experienced adverse events in their life. Like maybe it was poverty, Maybe the parents got a divorce. Maybe you were abused. You know, the cluster of questions that they asked, and what they found was there was a significant relationship between the number of adverse events a person experienced and later health problems in life. It was like, whoa, right? There's a great book out there that talks about that mind-body connection. The body doesn't forget, all right? But dealing with issues that come up in the past, and you might get triggered as the holidays come around and you're getting together with family or whatnot, right? But getting help to deal with issues and move beyond those, because oftentimes they are having an impact in our life and we may not even be aware of it. Talked about isolation, poor stress management, if we're ignoring our stress and not making changes to live a more healthy work-life balance, that's a problem. And we also talked a little bit about stigma, all right? Everybody needs help at some point in their life. So, stress management is closely tied to our mental health, how we're managing the everyday stress that we experience. Now, something that's important to keep in mind as you work with your teams, employees, whatnot, interact with others, is that we all experience stress differently in terms of what stresses us out. Years ago, I was working out in my garden because that's one of my stress relief situations. And I'm working over here and I see something out of the corner of my eye. Got the hint there? Right? And I look over there and there's a snake. And I'm not all that, I used to catch them as a kid, did a lot of that kind of stuff. So I'm like, whoa, but that's pretty big. I don't think I want to mess with him and I need to work over here. So I go inside and I call out to my husband, hey, Phil, can you come take care of something for me? Had no idea that he was really not into snakes. He comes out there, sees it, screams, and he's standing on the chair in the patio, just petrified, right? And I'm like, whoa. Plan B, I go over to the neighbor boy who's 16. Nick comes over, he's like, where'd you see it last? And I'm like, he's over there. And he's just like reaching in there, not worried at all. And he comes out with this thing and I'm just like, oh my word. What is stressful to you may not be stressful to another person. And so that's important that we can read the room, that we have good emotional intelligence and see, how people are responding to situations. How we manage our stress is influenced by our life experience, how our parents manage stress, our genetics, our personality, whether or not we have a support system, how we're living our daily life, our habits. So if we're focusing on the big three of exercise, sleep, and nutrition and have good habits there, that's going to make us a lot more resilient, all right? And making sure that as we're experiencing stress, okay, I'm going to be the fulcrum in the middle, that as our cup fills with stressors, that we're emptying it out with coping self-care strategies, all right? We need to take extra good care of ourselves so we don't get overwhelmed, stresses over here, with the stresses of life. There's things that we can do, and it's unique, for each individual to reduce that stress and empty that cup, if you will. All right. How many of you like Buzz Lightyear? Yeah? It's one of the best movies. The first one, Toy Story, right? So these are just some additional things to consider as you look at how you're managing stress. Understand when you're starting to react. Where do you notice it first? Oftentimes clients will say they feel tense, or they'll notice it when they're talking really fast, that they're stressed out, or little things will bother them that normally don't. And so understanding that, not ignoring it, but here's a big one that we all need to work on, and that's setting realistic expectations. It ties into self-compassion, giving yourself self-compassion, permission to make a mistake, like with slides, right? You know, it happens. You know, we're going to make mistakes. We're not perfect. So what can we learn from that process? Oftentimes, when we tune into our self-awareness, our mental chatter, we find that there's a really critical person in there who can be almost impossible at times, expecting way too much. And so learning how to talk to ourselves, I am enough, right? I did the best I could. I feel good, right? To talk about to ourselves in that way is very good for our mental health, all right? And I do love the different apps that are out there for meditation and mindfulness, kind of help us to develop that sense of self-awareness so that we know what are those thought processes that are maybe causing more suffering versus making us feel better. And with clients, I will often say, well, what would you tell a loved one or a very good friend in this situation that you're in? And oftentimes they're very kind and compassionate, but it's just hard to apply that to oneself. And part of that is really hard with successful people, right? Because y'all are a bunch of perfectionists and you have a lot of drive and persistence, and that's what makes you successful. And so it's like working with a bunch of engineers. It's like, it's okay, you're gonna be okay. Take a break. Anyway, so tuning into that. Some of this is very repetitive of what I've already talked about, but one of the key things that I like to share in stress management is, number one, identify the source of your stress. Number two, how are you thinking about it in your head? And the question that goes with that is the way I'm thinking about this situation helping me or creating more suffering? Right? What is my stressor? How am I thinking about it? Is the way I'm choosing to think, because we can train our brain to think differently, is it helping me or hurting me? Am I getting in the rabbit hole of hypothetical what ifs? Or am I focused on regrets from the past? And then the final one, which is really important, put your energy in things you can control rather than concentrating on things you have absolutely no control over, such as other people, right? Great book. Have any of you read The Untethered Soul? That is a really good book. And it's talking about this mental wellness and how we can learn to be aware and to focus our mental energy on things that are good rather than things that bring us down. And it's not about denial. You know, things happen all around us. It's just choosing. It's kind of like, how are you going to look at the situation? Can you see a silver lining here, or are you going to be bombarded and defeated by it? And chances are our initial response is to be defeated, and that's okay. But then once we get up and recover and we have our time, then it's like, okay, what are we going to do? Think Like a Monk is another really good one. And it's not a religious book, but it does talk about the value of being self-aware and the energies and things that go along with that. It's an excellent book. All right. I'm thinking we are just about done. So, oh yeah, look at that. Okay, so here's what we encourage for healthy work habits, all right? So number one, limit the extra hours, right? The only one who's going to check out of the office and make that okay is you. And yes, there are going to be times and seasons that are busier. But if you're working, 60 hours a week, that's not sustainable. It's going to take a toll, okay? And so being aware of your time and setting boundaries between work and home, scheduling meetings during core work hours, Don't you love it when someone calls you at 4 o'clock and wants to set a meeting for 4 o'clock on a Friday? No, right? So think about when you're most productive and schedule the important stuff there. Get up and take breaks. How many of you, like if you work at a desk, do you have the desks where you can lift it up and stand for a little bit, sit for a little bit, go outside, walk around? We find that people who take breaks, who actually take their lunch even to, this is big, a different location away from their desk, are overall more productive and efficient in their work. Taking mental breaks help. Focusing on one thing at a time helps. Multitasking overrated. Whole different workshop. So try not to take your work home or your email, using the vacation time that you've earned. Setting realistic expectations for yourself. How many of you have ever done a home improvement project or had someone else do it, right? Did it work out just like HGTV? You know, where they go in on the weekend and they tear apart the entire kitchen and throw in a new one and they're like, whoo, that was great, Monday, time to go to work. No. The same is true with our work. There's always going to be unexpected things that come up. And so we set a reasonable schedule for ourselves, and then we're going to add some cushion here for the unexpected, right? It's one way of being self-compassionate. You have the right to manage your schedule. There you go. Utilizing resources. Some companies, because of COVID, are going to hybrid work situations. You know, I think some people learned during that process, you know, during COVID, that they're actually more productive at home than they were in the office, whereas others need to be in the office, you know, and so it's just looking at being willing to think outside of the box and how employees do their work. And obviously your industry and the type of work that's happening, you know, that needs to be done is a factor. So this is it. Here's our summary. These are your key takeaway points. Your mental health is important. All stages and ages. Talking about it, being here, gathering information, sharing it with others will help to reduce that stigma. Mental health is very common. Mental health issues are hugely common. So those are just some more tips on some of the key things. Again, I have copies of the handouts here if anyone didn't get one. Then these are just some of the local resources here in the Lee Summit community, as well as national resources. And so I wanted to make sure that you all have that information as well. Suicide prevention. Trevor Project is with our LGBT community and supporting. First Call, substance abuse. They'll get you hooked into places in Kansas City and help navigate that. You got Rediscover Mental Health that has many programs, some of which at a sliding scale. But anyway, there's a lot of resources available, and it's good to know what those resources are.